All right, so we're doing problem number, I'll go ahead and do problem number 6 on the solving rational inequalities sheet. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get everything to one side of the inequality. And it doesn't matter what side you get it to, but in all the other problems we had been subtracting things over and moving them all to the left side, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to have 2x plus 5 over x plus 1, and I'm going to subtract over x plus 1 over x minus 1, and that is greater than or equal to 0. So at this point, I need to get a common denominator between the two fractions. So I can see that one fraction has x plus 1 as the denominator, the other fraction has x minus 1. So I'm going to go ahead and take the first fraction and I'm going to multiply it by x minus 1 on the top and the bottom. And for the second fraction, I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by x plus 1. So when I FOIL everything out, that means that the top of my first fraction is going to be 2x squared minus 2x plus 5x minus 5. And that's over that common denominator of x plus 1, x minus 1. And then I'm subtracting off that second fraction. And when I FOIL that second fraction, I get x squared plus x plus x plus 1. And when I go through and do that, I know that I did that math kind of quickly. You should make sure that you can see where I got that from. So you should FOIL it yourself rather than just copy it down to make sure that you understand it as well. All right, so at this point, I'm just going to write this as one big fraction. So I have that common denominator underneath. And then on the top for that first fraction, I have 2x squared. Negative 2x and positive 5x makes positive 3x. And if I look back up here, I had that x plus x. This right here is going to be 2x. And so now I'm going to go ahead and I can take that negative and distribute it. So that's going to leave me with negative x squared minus 2x minus 1. All right, and again, it would be good for you to be doing the steps on your own paper and following along rather than just copying to make sure that you understand what I'm doing there. So now I'm going to go ahead and combine like terms. And I kind of ditched my inequality there, so this inequality should be greater than or equal to 0. This inequality should be greater than or equal to 0. Same thing for what I'm about to write down here, greater than or equal to 0. So 2x squared minus an x squared is just x squared. 3x minus 2x is positive x. Negative 5 and negative 1 makes negative 6. So at this point, I have what I wanted. Everything's all on one side. I have the common denominator. And so now I just need it to look like it's in factored form. So I'm looking for two things that multiply to negative 6, but add to positive 1. So I'm going to keep that denominator. So to multiply to negative 6, but add to positive 1, that would be x plus 3, x minus 2. So here's the point where we draw our number line. And on my number line, I'm going to go ahead and get out of this. So I'm going to switch colors so you guys can see this. So on the number line, we know that for sure x cannot equal negative 1 and x cannot equal positive 1. We know that for sure, no matter what the inequality says. Now on the top, we know that if x equals negative 3, then that's going to make the whole fraction equal 0. And because I have this equal to part where I can equal 0, then that's okay. So x is allowed to equal -3. Based on this factor, I know that if x equals +2, then the fraction will equal 0. And again, because of this equal to sign right here, we're allowed to have that. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my number line with those things that I know. So I have, that's -3, and I can equal -3, so I'm going to fill that in. And then we have -1, which I cannot equal, and +1, which I cannot equal, and +2, which I can equal. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and choose numbers on each side of all of those. So something that's to the left of -3 would be like -4. And what I'm doing is I'm taking that and I'm plugging them in right here. So -4 plus 3 is a negative. -4 minus 2 is a negative. -4 plus 1 is a negative. And -4 minus 1 is also a negative. So when I take -4 and I plug it in for these, I get a negative times a negative divided by a negative times a negative. And overall, that's going to be positive. All right, a number between -3 and -1 would be like -2. So -2 plus 3 is a positive. -2 minus 2 is a negative. -2 plus 1 is negative. And -2 minus 1 is also negative. So that would end up being a negative right there. A number between -1 and +1 is 0. 0 plus 3 is positive. 0 minus 2 is negative. 0 plus 1 is positive. 0 minus 1 is negative. So that would be a positive. You'll find it's pretty common for them to alternate. Not always. You can't just assume that, you have to check it. But oftentimes it will be the case that they'll alternate. 1.5 is a number between 1 and 2. So 1.5 plus 3 is positive. 1.5 minus 2 is negative. 1.5 plus 1 is positive. 1.5 minus 1 is also positive. So that's negative. And something bigger than 2 is like 3. 3 plus 3 is positive. 3 minus 2 is positive. 3 plus 1 is positive. 3 minus 1 is positive. So that's definitely positive. Okay, so now that we've got all those pluses and minuses, we have to consider our inequality symbol. And our inequality symbol is that we wanted all that stuff to be greater than or equal to 0. And so the things that are greater than or equal to 0 would be all those plus signs. So that means that the answer for this problem is from -infinity to -3. And then, and -3 I can equal, so that's a bracket. All right, and then -1 to 1, and those are not filled in, so those are both parentheses. And then 2 to infinity, and 2 I can equal, so that's a bracket.